Hey guys, it's Philip from the Honda Resource. Thanks so much for joining me on this episode. So on this episode, this is the second part of the two-part series on installing a D17A1 into 2001-2005 Honda Civic. Also in this video, I'm going to show you some tips on installing a JDM D17A into your US spec car so that everything works flawlessly and you can drive it with no check engine lights. So yeah, if you need any information on removing the engine, check out part 1 of the series. And yeah, go ahead and hit the like button. But yeah, here, let's get to it. All right, so in this case, we are just reinstalling another factory D17A1 into this car, but I just wanted to kind of go over a few things that I would recommend, like if you had a JDM motor, and differences that I've known. I've put in several of the JDM motors over the years and just figured I would give you guys a few tips so that you don't have to go through the trials and tribulations that I did. Sometimes this little post mount here is different, so you'll have to change out this post mount. It's pretty straightforward. It's got two 14mm bolts here, and then under the alternator, it's got like three 14mm bolts here. So you just swap that out from your US block over to the JDM block. It don't matter if it's a D17A1 or a D17A2. The brackets for the alternator, the post mount is the same. The crank pulleys are a little bit different. So if you don't want to change up your belt sizes and you want to be able to continue to use the factory belt sizes, change over to the US crank pulley. It's just a 19mm here, and you can change the crank pulley out. Another thing, I won't be able to show you on this particular head, but I have another VTEC head over here, so I'll show you on that one. But on the VTEC, all right, so this is a VTEC head, and so this is your VTEC pressure sensor. The Japanese motors don't use a VTEC pressure sensor. They just have a little plug in here. So you can remove the little plug. It has a 12mm head, and then you can take the sensor off of your US motor and put it on to the Japanese motor. And that'll give you your oil pressure sensor for the VTEC. If you don't put this on there, you're going to have a check engine light, and it's going to leave the car in limp mode. You can get this sensor, if you don't have it, you can get it off of most of the V6 model, like the J30, J32, J35s, or any D series, like a D16, which is VTEC, or a D17 VTEC. Or if you find one off of a B series, like a B18 or a B16, they're all the same. So, or like an Accord, like a F series, those are pretty plentiful around here. So you can go get one of these off of those too. Just be sure to swap that over. And the last thing that I know of is the throttle body. So the Japanese throttle bodies don't have two wheels, so you won't be able to keep your cruise control. This is your actual throttle, and this is your cruise. So your cruise control cable ties onto that. And in order to keep cruise control, you just swap over the US throttle body. It's pretty straightforward. Just the 4 bolts here, or 3 bolts and 1 nut. And then it's just a couple hoses right here that connect to it. And he swaps right over. Oh, and these 2 hoses here. So seriously though, it's pretty straightforward. Swap it over, take one off, put the other one on, done. So other than that, you're good to go. The flex plate on the Japanese motor is the same, so really no need in changing that. And you know, like in this case, this one does not have an EGR. So if you had a non-EGR car originally, and you're putting on another motor that has EGR, you can either just leave the EGR disconnected, or you can take these couple bolts out of the thermostat housing here. It's got like 1 nut here, a nut here, and then like a bolt here, and a bolt here, and they're all 12mm. And you can pull this whole piece off the end of the head here and swap it onto your new motor. I mean, it's not that big a deal. So that's the main difference. Is everything else is be good to go. So right now all I'm going to do is get this old stuff off of this one, like this old intake manifold or the old exhaust manifold that they've cut the converter off of, like get these hoses off of here, or they just cut the hoses and get the rest of this wiring harness that they've just cut. Get all this mess off of here and get it ready to put back into our car. All right, so I got everything stripped off this motor that I needed to get stripped off to match it basically to what I took out. And before we go to install it, we need to make sure that we have our alignment dowels here and that there's not any alignment dowels still in the transmission, which there's not. So there's not any on that. And you can also look at your old engine. So like on this one, the block was actually broke. You see it would go here, and it has that alignment dowel, and it has that alignment dowel. So we know that we don't need to remove one, because if you have one, like say if it was in this spot here on the engine and it was in this spot here on the transmission, they would hit each other and they wouldn't mate up. So just make sure that you only have 2 alignment dowels for the whole assembly. And now we're ready to install this into our engine bay. All right, so before I got the engine all the way in, I went ahead and bolted the compressor back, the AC compressor back on, so that I could actually get to the bolts. So if you need any information on that, you can look back at the previous video when I took it off, and you can see how it would be beneficial to go ahead and go ahead and bolt that on before you get the engine all the way in. So now I'm just going to continue putting it in. All right, so the main thing that you want to do on the bell housing bolts is once you get one of those alignment dowels put in, you can just get like one of these front bolts started. I chose the one on the top. Let me get the camera over here and show you. I just kind of started this bolt right here by hand. As you can see, there's a gap there. But I just kind of got a couple rounds of the thread on there, and then I kind of did it for this bell housing bolt. It's like right here. And then I did it for this one. So basically, once you, to get them started, you can just grab one of your straps and just wiggle the motor around. And it needs to be picked up because it's a little low on this side. So, I mean, I can pick it up a little bit with my hoist. I don't really know. Yeah, my strap over here may be a little too tight to do that. So just tighten these, gradually, work your way around. And if it starts feeling like it's getting in a bind, stop. And they're all 17, so just tighten them down and progressively, and you'll be good to go. So I got the top 3 bell housing bolts done. So it's this one here, the one that's like right here, and the one that's like right over here. Now that I got those 3 bell housing bolts on, obviously the AC compressor is bolted on already too. I can go ahead and put my mount back on, and then once I get the mount back on, I can take the hoist back off. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I just got the mount here, and it just goes in here like so. And I'll put my 3 14mm bolts back in that, and then put the little bracket back on here. All right, so basically now I've got the motor bolted in. I got the mount on here like I was saying previously. Got the engine hoist out of the way, and it's pretty much sitting in here now. It's not moving, and it's already bolted to the transmission with 3 bolts, and it's obviously bolted to the mount here. So now I'm just gonna start hooking everything back up on the top side, and then we'll lift the car up and connect everything on the bottom side. Just got stuff like our hoses here. Slide this little bracket. Slide the wiring harness back on here. taking out my bolt that I used to put my straps on. It's not a factory bolt for this. It's out of something else. I just got out of my bolt bin. It's just a 14mm bolt. It don't have to be that long. It could be a shorter one, just something to put in the back of the head to get her installed. And all these sensors hook back up. So if you have any questions about sensors and stuff, you can check the first video. I kind of showed more in depth about which ones to take off. So, you know, if you took it off, put it back on. It's about the easiest way I can describe that. I don't really feel like going through and showing each individual plug that I'm putting back on. So one of the coil packs was damaged on this motor, so I just went ahead and pulled it out, and I'll put one on from the old motor. I actually put the correct bolts back in this because the ones that were in this motor before weren't the right ones. I took them out of, well, I'm sorry, the ones that were in this car originally were not the right ones, but these were on this motor, and they're the correct ones. Once you've done this stuff 100 times, you kind of know which bolts belong where. If you see, I just kind of throw all my bolts up here on the windshield cowl, and it's just because I've done this too many times. And I don't really, it's not a mental thing for me to where I have to keep track of which ones go where. I just can look at them and pretty much know. And I got my heater hose on back there. And then we'll put this bracket that holds the heater hoses back on. Hook up our oil pressure sensor back here. And put our two 10mm bolts back in here. All right, we got our booster hose back on there. And then, let's see. Put our wiring harness back on here. And get our heater hose back on here. Now it is missing a little bracket that goes on back here. I don't know if this other motor has it or not. It actually did. Most of the time this is connected to the wiring harness, but you can see it's broke away. But we'll slide it back on here. And then our heater hose will slide into that. Alright, and then our other little hose goes to, I'm going to change this one out because I don't like that that clamp they had on it. So this is our hose from the other, or originally from this motor, I guess. And then just hook it back up like so. And actually I think that's the piece of that bracket that was missing on the other one. I'll hook this throttle body back up. Got to hook our two little hoses up on the for the evap, one on the front, one on the back. pretty simple. All right, so then we gotta hook up our fuel lines, and it just pushes on, and then we got our little black piece that it's like a retainer. And then we can put on our throttle cable. Just make sure you hook up the one that's longer goes on the black, the one that's shorter goes on the back. All right, so we got our two 10mm nuts. One there, one here. All right. Hook up our TPS, our evap, tighten down our throttle cables. A lot of this stuff is just 10mm, man. It's pretty simple, straightforward. All right, so it looks like everything here is hooked up. So now we just gotta like put the manifold back in and radiator hoses. I can go ahead and stick them back on. All right, I've got the lower one on. Typically these are spring clamps and you just use a pair of pliers to do them, but someone has replaced them with worm gear clamps, so I'm just gonna leave the worm gear clamps on them for this one. A lot of times I take the dipstick out too while I'm doing all this stuff just to make sure that I don't break the top off, because I've broken several tops off in the past. It just makes for, make sure that I'm not breaking one. This motor actually came in with a broken dipstick, so thankfully I had the thought to pull one off the old motor. So I stick it back in now. All of the wiring harness is hooked up with the exception of like the alternator and the O2 sensors. I guess now I can put the exhaust manifold back on. Now again, this car that I'm reusing the exhaust manifold that was on this car already. It didn't have a heat shield, and it's been welded several times. Making do with what we got. So it's got 3 nuts along the bottom, 2 bolts at the top. Again, if yours does have the heat shield on it, you can do this without removing the heat shield. On the bottom side here, and I went ahead and got the flex plate bolts in here. So basically just start them. There's 8 bolts. Turn your crank, I put the crank pulley back on too. So make sure you put your keyway in that and then tighten the 19mm. And then turn the crankshaft counterclockwise. Don't turn it clockwise, you'll mess up the timing. So turn it counterclockwise and put these bolts in there. That's pretty simple, straightforward. And now I gotta put the remaining 2 bell housing bolts in. So there's like one right here, yeah, right there. And then there's like one over here above this axle. It's like, I don't know if you can be able to see it or not, but it's like right here, right above the axle. So put those in and then put in like my dust plate first and then the shift cable and then the little brackets that hold it. So just put on the time lapse, so I'll do all that. I've got the O2 sensors hooked up on the manifold here. I went ahead and hooked this ground strap up, 10mm here. I got what else did I do? I don't remember what else I did. But yeah, now we're gonna put the alternator on, and then we can get the alternator AC belt on. Then we can move over to doing power steering pump. So I got the alternator installed. Well, I've got it bolted on. I hadn't put the wiring on it yet. But yeah, it's just slides on here. And then it's got the 10mm nut that holds the charge wire, and then the little green clip just slides in. I'm gonna put the power steering pump on. and then try to finish getting this stuff right here installed. I have to put our reservoir bracket back on. This video is taking me about twice as long to do this job because I'm doing this video. But I'm trying to help one of you guys learn something today. All right, and then we got our bracket here that goes on the back of the valve cover. It's 10 millimeter on this too. Alright, and then we can slide a piece back up here. Slide this back up here too. Alright, so this bolt here goes in the bottom. And then the regular 12 millimeter nut goes on the bottom. All right. Loosen the tensioner off. Stick it back in here. Roll it forward. Put our 10 millimeter bolt back in the top. And then the 12 millimeter nut that has the washer built onto it goes right here. Tighten the tin up. Get those kind of finger tight, but don't tighten them all the way down. We haven't put our belt on yet. Get our belt. Alright. Tighten that down. Alright, our little bracket goes back on the AC line. And it has two 10 millimeter bolts that holds it. All right, now with the exception of installing the air box and checking fluids, making sure the radiator's full, it's ready to start. It's just finished up the motor swap on the ES1 and got it cleaned off, pressure washed and stuff. And I did find the air box in the trunk. I didn't find the outer piece though, so. But it runs really good. Fired up first try. Well, after the battery was charged. The battery was dead initially. We charged the battery up a little bit and it fired right up. So all is good here. AC works, heat works, everything works like it's supposed to. And really happy. So hopefully the customer will be happy with this install, and hopefully it'll be able to help one of you guys get your car back on the road. So if this video helpful, please leave a like, drop me a comment, let me know how it helped you, or if you just got some commentary about the video. If you didn't like something, tell me that too. And if you don't like the video, hit the dislike twice. As always guys, I appreciate you tuning in, and if you need any information on how to remove the engine, be sure to check out the first video in the series. It's part 1, this is part 2. So hope you come back and see some more videos. I got quite a playlist on just the 7th generation Civic alone, and hopefully you'll find some useful content on there. As always guys, thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you on another one. Peace. Purring.